that I think we have to go through to answer your question. The politically correct answer to your question is yes. So you knew the answer when you got up and said it. So we feel good. You're a different culture and I'm a different culture. Let's assume we can figure what that means. I'm not quite
I am
so
a
sure.
musician, by the way.
Yeah, I know you were saying. And so I say, okay, we gotta. You have to understand me, and I have to understand you. So I remember, the settlers of the United States wiped out the Native American population, and then they made films about the remnants, and they glowingly looked nostalgically at their philosophy about the sacred nature of the land. Every second Western film made in the 60s had such an episode. Little Big Man was the most liberal of these. And a completely different philosophy about time, about the meaning of life, not about work, not about productivity. Completely different cross-cultural conversation. So, I think that these are very difficult questions because, this question of colonialism, imperialism, of imposing our values on somebody else, but it is an interdependent world. And the question is, number one, let's take poverty. What do you do with a culture for some religious or metaphysical reason, the construct of poverty is not our construct of poverty? We feel sorry for them, but they don't feel sorry for themselves. What do you do with a culture that treats women differently, radically different in terms of education, health, and so forth? Yes, you have to have a cultural construct, but we are right and they are wrong. What do you do about international relations cross-culturally when people have a different view of time and the future? And, the old communist regimes were an interesting environment. It was an environmental disaster because they believed in progress through human ingenuity and reason. So pollution would turn out to be a virtue through human ingenuity, and which is why East Germany and Russia and Romania looked as terrible as they did with it, because they didn't buy in to this nostalgic view of history, of preserving a past. So I think the cross-cultural conversation as well, when it comes to mutual interest, is to discover that mutual don't exist, where, how we construe meaning in life, ambition, self-worth, identity, is radically different with some other culture. And it's important to understand what it is, but it may not be the basis of an agreement because the policy, because in the sense this is a universal problem and it cannot be solved segmentally. And therefore, somebody has to give in to somebody else on a set of values that may not be shared for religious or historical cultural reasons. So this is not as simple as it appears.
One quick follow-up. I meant it more as a self-criticism statement. By looking cross-culturally, we learn to re-examine ourselves, and you kind of dismiss that part of it. So
no, I didn't dismiss it. Yeah. I don't dismiss it. I'm saying I think the conversation is much harder.
And you don't have to go as far as West Cameroon. I think a business school needs to talk to the environmental studies school on campus. That's the kind of thing I think needs to happen a lot more. I was at a meeting recently at another school on sustainability, and there was no one from the economics and business schools there. It was all just Birkenstock types, who I really like, But if you don't mix it up, then you don't shave away your own preconceptions.
And your point is very well taken, but the identity is, our cultural understanding is fluid. It's not static, like language. It's not static. So it evolves, and the more we're in contact. For example, the New York City we now deal with, we have 2 high schools in the city of New York. And we have also a new campus building in Palestine, in Abu Dis, in Jerusalem, outside of Jerusalem, the West Bank. Now, these are different places from Annandale, and our faculty is a different world. But in the New York, when we opened these high schools, I was struck, having grown up in New York, how different New York was than it is now. When I grew up in New York, it was not an immigrant city. The majority of the kids in our high schools have parents or themselves not born in the United States. We've returned to a New York much more like the New York of 1900 than it was in 1960. So what I'm suggesting is our own, as you say, the conference is very important, and it does happen. But the use of identity or cultural difference is a barrier that has to be overcome if there's going to be an international solution, a cross-cultural solution to what is clearly a cross-cultural problem.
Get in one last question, and it's actually returning to the theme that I raised earlier. The impetus for this conference is the sense that somehow our current actions in the next decade, and certainly the actions of today's young people, are going to require something from humanity that is unprecedented. And I want to call it leadership. And I want to just, and actually you did answer the question about leadership. So I got you on record saying that it was courage not to be passive. So you did tell me that. But I wanted to just give you an opportunity to just comment, should we be producing at Bard citizens or leaders? And if so, is there a difference, and what might it be?
Andy.
Oh, boy. Well, I guess in the realm where, Bill McKibben talks about the silver buckshot, not silver bullets these days, I think distributed leadership is an important trait right now. We need, and I've used this hackneyed thing on the blog lately, Generation E, where the E is not just environment or energy, but it's also equity and enterprise, where just people are oriented toward the reality that the norms that brought us from 1 billion people in 1830 to nearly 7 billion people in 2009, and now on a planet that has 1 billion teenagers, where we only had 1 billion people altogether in 1830, that we're at this extraordinary nexus, this extraordinary juncture where, we're clear, every time in nature you see this kind of like pattern, something, it's very rare for it just to continue going unless you're out in space doing is pure physics. And we're on a finite planet. So that brings an imperative to be thinking about these issues as part of whatever life course you choose coming out of here. And so the leadership is certainly is partially just framed around your own determination to make some part of your experience oriented toward this transformation, this juncture, and what's your role in doing that. And obviously we could use a couple more Obama-type leaders around the world. That's kind of a nice vision thing there. He's speaking, by the way, he'll be the first president since Kennedy on Monday to speak to the National Academy of Sciences. Other presidents have spoken at the building, but he's the first one who will speak to the Academy. So let's see what he says about that on Monday.
Very, very good sign. I would say, in that to answer your question, that, everybody has a bit of both. Everybody has, it depends on the circumstances. So really a program has to educate at a minimum for citizenship and at a maximum for leadership. Seems to me, the way you pose it.
Well, we'd like to thank our two wonderful panelists.